I was one of those snobbish addicts. I mean, I
Aren't we
was
all?
not, yeah, I mean, I was not going to go to some shithole. I like just was not going to do it. And so I went to the Meadows amongst all the celebs, all the important people. Um, and as I'm being driven from the Meadows to the airport, I tell the bus driver to stop at the convenience store, and I get like a tall boy. That's what we call them here in Oklahoma, like a big, tall beer. Yeah. And drink that and then hide that when I get home. And then shortly thereafter, full blown relapse again.
Hello, Josh. Thank you so much for doing this podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Stephanie, thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
I just appreciate anybody who is open about recovery. It's hard to talk about this kind of stuff and it's hard to talk about it in a really transparent way, but I think it's helpful.
You know, recovery is hard, but you can let some of the air out of it when you speak about it, when you talk about it. So you don't bottle up everything inside. And I've lived a life full of a lot of mistakes, a lot of regret. But when you can share those things with other people and admit those things, it releases a lot of the power from it.
From what I know about you, it seems like getting sober was an especially hard struggle for you. Is that is that true?
I think that's true. And so for the benefit of your listener, so I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I live in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, in the Bible Belt, doing the Lord's work here. Um,
You
my
are.
wife, that's right. My wife is a podcaster. Her name is Jennifer Welch, and she's the co-host of I've Had It podcast.
Big
And she,
fan.
thank you. I'll tell her. And she recently moved to New York City, and we recently took our youngest son to school at USC in Los Angeles. And,
Okay.
and so I am a true empty nester. Um, my oldest son is in law school at OU, University of Oklahoma. So I'm navigating this path of sobriety at age 57 completely alone for the first time in a long time. And I credit my wife, Jennifer, with a great deal of my sobriety. Like I give her a lot of credit. I know it's important that we give ourselves credit because we're the ones ultimately that are responsible for the work. But I have no doubt in my mind that I would not be here today with you. I wouldn't be sober had it not been for her, had it not been for my two boys.
Now, why do you say that? Why do you say that about her? Why do you think she was so instrumental?
For the first time, I think in my life, when I met her and we had kids, I began to love something more than I loved myself. And all of us as addicts know that the loathing that we have for ourselves, all the shame. And I didn't love myself enough to want to get sober. I didn't think that I was deserving, um, but I loved these other things in my life. And I loved her. I loved my youngest son, or I'm sorry, my oldest son at the time, Dylan, was born in 2002. And I began to love these things more than I loved me so that I would do things for them that I wouldn't have normally done for myself. And Jennifer was resilient. Uh, in 2002, she helped me go to rehab at a place called the Meadows in Arizona. And I stayed 45 days there and relapsed the day that they released me. And I came back home, used opiates.
Hold on. Let me
Yeah, we could.
that is like a juicy little tidbit right
Yeah.
there. Okay. I mean, I kind of want the whole story. I want the early days. I've heard you talk about it on the podcast before about like the pot use as pretty young. I think you started. Just take me back there,
Uh,
and then we'll catch
okay.
up to where we just
Okay,
left
and
off.
one of the problems, Stephanie, like, I can't ever go out and get a new therapist because it would take, like, 18 sessions to get them current, you know? So I'm landlocked with the one I have because there's so much, and as most addicts know, there's some really good stories, there's really bad stories, but let me try to give you, like, a drive-by version of this so that your
Yeah.
listener doesn't completely fall asleep on us. So I graduated high school in 1987. I probably started using drugs and drinking when I was about 12 or 13 years old in a small town in southeastern Oklahoma called Hugo. Um, my mother was a recovering alcoholic when she died, but she was in active addiction for some of my childhood. My father was an alcoholic. Um, I subsequently helped him get sober in later years, but I lived amongst a family of addicts and alcoholics. I didn't understand boundaries. I didn't understand discipline. I didn't understand being loyal, fidelity, being honest. Wasn't taught that. Um, I was a product of what I was taught to be, which is a raging addict, alcoholic who didn't know how to function in the normal world with the normal set of boundaries and values that most people take for granted and practice every day. I was ill equipped for that and somehow made my way through college at Oklahoma State University, graduated, not without 3 DUIs in my first trip to rehab in 1988. Um, but at that age, I thought, okay, I'm going to go to rehab. I got a couple of DUIs. It's no big deal. I was never going to be serious about being sober at that stage. And I went from 1988 up until my next rehab visit in 2002, which is at the Meadows. I somehow, during that period of time, graduated college, went to law school, passed the bar, started
Wow, that's no easy
law
feat.
in Oklahoma City. No, and it and I was in active addiction during those periods of time. I mean, I'll never forget, in law school thinking to myself, I don't know how to sit down and study. I don't know how to be disciplined." And when I say this, I mean it genuinely. Like, I didn't have the skill set, to be honest with people. I didn't know how to be, um, honest in a relationship with a woman. I didn't, value a woman. I
Well, when you
sexualized
say when you say
everything.
you didn't know how to be honest, do you mean like you were cheating? Do you mean
Yes,
just
yes,
the using
all of it.
drugs and lying
All
about it?
all of the above. Infidelity, lying about using. I mean, if there's a list of boxes, you could check every one of them, and that would have been me. And I didn't, and so in short, I sort of became what I was groomed to be, which was, uh which was sort of a lawless alcoholic. And I was able to put Band-Aids on it. I was able to temper it at times, but as you know, and other recovering alcoholics and addicts know, the dragon will rear its head at some point in time. And so I met Jennifer in 2001, and she got pregnant with our oldest son, Dylan. He was born in 2002, and then it was the same year before, or I'm sorry, shortly after his birth in 2003 is when I um, went to treatment for a serious opiate addiction. And if you'll recall, in the early 2000s, that was the introduction of Oxycontin to the world. It was certainly my introduction to the world of opiates. I was what you would describe as kind of one of those heavy drinkers, frat boy drinkers. Didn't know anything about these pain pills or benzos or any of that stuff. And I had a surgery and got acquainted with opiates. Um, and then I discovered Oxycontin. And that's when I was in the early throes of my relationship with Jennifer, and our son was shortly born. And at the same time, I'm battling opiate addiction, and she's thinking, "What the fuck did I just sign up for?" Um, and we had this beautiful son that was born, and she was hell bent on making sure that I didn't kill myself on opiates and that her son, our son Dylan, didn't grow up without a father. And so it's a long, long struggle for many people that know it. Like this stuff doesn't happen overnight.
So she sends you to rehab, and this is the trip to the Meadows?
That's right. And
And
this is
then
in
what do you
2000.
learn in there? How's it different than the first times that you went to rehab?
And this is what I tell people. So I was one of those snobbish addicts. I mean, I
Aren't we
was
all?
not, yeah, I mean, I was not going to go to some shithole. I like just was not going to do it. And so I went to the Meadows amongst all the celebs, all the important people. Um, and as I'm being driven from the Meadows to the airport, I tell the bus driver to stop at the convenience store, and I get like a tall boy. It's what we call them here in Oklahoma, like a big, tall beer. Yeah. And drink that and then hide that when I get home. And then shortly thereafter, full blown relapse again.
But when
And
you're leaving rehab, I'm just so curious about this. I mean, this is a very not unusual story. It's a typical story. When you're in rehab, are you like, I'm changed, I feel spiritual, or are you like, this is kind of bullshit and I think I can handle it and this is overkill that I'm even here? What was the thinking of like, I need to stop and go get a beer?
I would think it was more in the latter. And I wasn't there for myself. I was there because I started to suffer consequences in relationships and other areas of my life. And so I was there to sort of put a band aid on this problem.
Right.
And I knew when I was there, I knew that long term sobriety was not part of my plan at that.
Okay.
So, but I was also, I don't know if there's such a thing as like a kind-hearted drug addict, lying drug addict, but I would consider myself kind of a gentle, lovable, uh, kind-hearted piece of shit drug addict, if there is such a thing. But so I came back, and then shortly thereafter, I went to another place called Talbot Recovery Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and that was a place that was um, created originally for doctors in recovery, and then it transitioned over to professionals, and now I think treats everyone. But that was the first time, and that was in the latter part of '03. I remember when I went to Talbot. Um, I remember this sort of moment of where we all just throw our hands up in the air and we just say, you know what, I'll do any fucking thing that you tell me.
So
I'll stay.
what was different? You leave the Meadows, you're like, I think I have some more drinking to do. Then you drink again. What was that moment that you're like, this is not working. I've got to go back to treatment?
Well, it was the birth of my son and my relationship with my wife, Jennifer.
Your second
And
son.
well, Dylan was my first son. He was born in 2002.
Right. But then you went to rehab after that.
Right.
But then when you went back to rehab and you were taking it more seriously and you were a bit more desperate, which I feel like we all addicts wish each other desperation, right?
Right. I think it was a series of things though, because the first time when I went to the Meadows, I promised myself that I wasn't going to raise my son the way that I was raised. I wasn't going to subject him to a life of dysfunction like I had. And so I had that determination, but I also didn't have the will to do it at that time. Like I knew it was the right thing to do, but you have to understand when drugs and alcohol become part of your fabric, and it was part of my existence. It was almost like people eat lunch every day at noon. It was part of my day to day being that I couldn't imagine living without. So, but when I came back from the Meadows and my son, I'd missed his first few steps. I'd missed his first Christmas. I'd missed all these things. Um, and I relapsed, and I knew I would obviously relapse. I'd relapsed on the way to the airport from the Meadows. But I do remember a shift in my brain, a shift in my mind that said, I'll go to another place. I'll do whatever it is I need to do. I'll let someone else tell me what to do. And I did. I did. That was and so this is the and that would have been 2003 through 2004, and that was my first, experience with any sort of long-term sobriety. It was when I went to Talbot, and I stayed for about 5 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and I needed every bit of it, and I would have stayed longer had they told me. My law practice was put on hold. I didn't have any consequences, with the bar association or anything like that at that point in time. And, and I came home and then started to experience a different way of life sober for the first time in my life. And it was, different, scary, different.
Not that fun at first.
No, not that fun and far from perfect. I mean, I think we all get that pink cloud feeling at some point, but then you realize the same shit is gonna happen if you don't get to go drink or take drugs to cope with it.
And so many more
Um,
things in the world are really irritating that you didn't have to, like, stay sober for before.
that's right. That's 100%.
People.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But, um, and so, and after Talbot, I stayed sober for about 5, 6 years consecutive, um, years, and then I went through a lot, personally with my practice of law. I had a situation happen that, caused me to resign from law, in 2012, and I relapsed after that. Uh, Jennifer and I Jennifer and I ended up getting divorced. I also had a second son that was born in 2006. I mean, there's so much ground to cover here, but, my it was not easy. None of that stuff is easy. Like, and I did a lot of really bad things, that I'm pretty candid about. Like, I look back on, how I treated Jennifer, some mistakes I made with my sons, things I made, decisions I made in my career, and, um, we have a lot of shame about those things, and shame for a drug addict is one of the worst things you can carry with you. Um, it's a source of relapse, continuous relapse, at least it was for me. And and so I ultimately went back to treatment in 2015. And so between now and 2015, I haven't been perfect, but I've been probably 98% sober. And what I mean by that is, um, let me give an example. So last June, I get these tension headaches, and I have a tendency to think that I can still go to a doctor and not tell them that, hey, I'm a raging drug addict. You can't prescribe me anything. And so I get these really bad tension headaches, and a doctor who I don't normally see prescribed me barbiturates. This was June of last year. And so I took the barbiturates, and after about a day, my wife and son noticed, like, Dad, you're not acting right. What's wrong with you? And, and I knew I probably shouldn't take them, but I also felt like I needed relief from the headaches. And so you play this mind game with yourself about, and so then I stopped taking them after a day. And I sort of caught myself um, and like these are not things I'm proud to have to say, but I would dare to say a lot of addicts find themselves sort of in these situations.
Oh my gosh. We were talking about this before we started recording, and it is so true. I think that it is a myth. Listen, I don't want to say that abstinence isn't great and that is the goal. But if we make it this thing like I have to be absolutely perfect, and I got to be really careful with my words here because, yes, you being sober is an amazing thing and it requires rigorous honesty and
Sure.
accountability and
Sure.
all the stuff. But if we make this bar so high that if you make a mistake like that, you go, "Oh my god, I'm not sober and now
That's
I have
right.
to start all over." It's very difficult for a lot of people to be perfect. And we have to allow for people to live their lives and be able to talk about stuff like you're talking about. What you're saying right now is going to help a lot of people.
Well, and I think that you hit the nail on the head. Like, this striving for perfection in recovery, uh, is almost setting the bar too high. You're setting yourself up for some disappointment. That doesn't mean that we can have an expectation of failure. Um, but it's like, so in what I do, like, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. And so let's say that I'm representing an 18 or 19-year-old kid who got caught with cocaine, and he's a really bad drug addict. And I sit that kid down and I ask him, "Okay, listen, you need to get sober. What in your life means more to you than taking cocaine, snorting cocaine, taking pills, drinking? What can you identify with that means more to you than those things?" And they can't answer that question. When you're 19, 20 years old, and when I was 19 or 20 years old, I couldn't answer that question because there wasn't anything that meant more to me than getting high, period. I didn't have a career. I didn't have a son. I didn't have anything that I gave a shit about more than I cared about drugs. And it was really that simple. Like, you can literally just like scales, which means more. And and you don't just have an epiphany and realize that over for me, a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. For me, it's been, I think, like I told you on our brief, phone conversation, I first went to rehab in 1987 and I last went in 2015. So that leaves a lot of years in between. It's filled with a lot of sadness. It's also filled with a lot of growth. I had a lot of happy moments. I had a lot of really sad moments. Um, but those are my experiences. I think sobriety for people is a very subjective thing and how they get sober. Uh, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of skipping all around a little bit, but I get ketamine infusions now, which have helped me immensely dealing with childhood trauma and depression. There's just a myriad of things I think that people can do. I'm certainly well versed in AA, and I attended it um, for a number of years, and I'm very supportive of it. And I think that it serves a very important purpose and function for a lot of people. For me, it wasn't the thing that I would choose as far as my recovery, but I recognize its value. I recognize how much it helps people.
Yeah, I mean, it does. What I what I like about a conversation like this is there are a lot of things that we don't think about, a lot of components to getting sober. Like, I just wanted to relate to the idea that I did a lot of cocaine at 19. I had just moved to LA. I was introduced to it. I was like, I think I
Um,
tried it in high school, but it didn't. I'm one of those people that certain drugs didn't do anything the first few times. And then when they do, the time that I got high off cocaine, I was like, what is happening? This is the best drug. This is the best feeling. And then I went hard for like a few months. At that age, I was living on my own. I had moved to Los Angeles, like I said. And for me, of course, just like you, just like your client, I didn't have any reason that I thought I needed to quit besides the consequence of this feels so horrible to me, and the things that I'm doing when I'm high on coke and the kind of degenerate people that I think are a good idea to go get in their car and go for a drive to an abandoned construction site to do more cocaine. And then I wake up in the morning and I go, I could have been murdered. It took that kind of consequence, which is very different than adult married with kids consequences, to go, okay, I shouldn't be doing cocaine. And I was able to make a decision that it's not a good drug for me. It seems like exactly the kind of thing that I could be addicted to. So I'm just never going to do it again. Of course, in my mind at that time, it was like, but drink, I don't have that problem with drinking.
exactly,
Drinking's
exactly.
just fun. It
Right.
literally took until I was 42 to go, wow, this drinking thing has never really worked out, and all the times that I go, I'm never gonna do that again. This time I'm gonna have 2 glasses of wine. This time I'm not gonna have 7 glasses of wine and pass out and get in a fight with my husband. All of those ti it took so long for me to go, "This is going nowhere but bad. And I have too much to lose.
Yeah.
But that is such an important component for people to understand. A lot of us don't, that's the what it takes either consequences of how I feel. I feel horrible on this drug. I'm going to die of a heroin overdose or I have too much to lose and I'm going to lose it.
That's right, and I tell people that you don't have to wait as long as I did to get sober, um, but it's tricky when your consequences are minimal or, you have, a landing zone, you have people that pick you up and enable you. Like, it gets difficult, um, because and I think you use this exact word, consequences. Those ultimately are the things that will bring about some sort of changed conduct or consequences. Whether, for me, it was, my law license to a certain extent when I resigned from the bar. It also related to my son, my failed marriage. All of these things were happening to me, that were consequences directly of my addiction. And you start to suffer enough consequences, and that will be a catalyst for some type of changed conduct. And it shouldn't have to be like that. You shouldn't have to lose everything. You shouldn't have to um, go to the very bottom. But sometimes that's what it takes, especially for someone like me that didn't know any other way of existence. I just didn't know how to be if I wasn't high. And literally mean that. Like, some people go to church and some people do things. That's what drinking was to me. It was just as normal as it could be. It was such a part of my culture and family. And, and it's hard to describe that sometimes to people that didn't grow up maybe in that type of environment. But I didn't know how just to release it, to let go of it. Uh, so it took a long, long time.
And how do you think you're doing now? And what do you think is the difference from before?
Well, I do I do several things now that I didn't do before. Um, I take ketamine infusions. That's helped me quite a bit as far as my recovery. Um, I try to be accountable and honest to my kids. I still take drug tests, and for the past 4 years, I voluntarily take drug tests. And when I was going through a reinstatement process to practice law again in 2022, 2023, I started taking drug tests literally to where I call, and I'm going to go this afternoon. I call in and get a color. And if my color's called that day, I have to go in and take a test. And I don't have a probation officer. I'm not charged with a crime. But it's those test results get emailed to my wife and my two boys. And I've done it for 4 years. And it's saved me, like in certain times. Like when, in that part of your brain that you think to yourself when you're alone, or you can do this, or you can do that. Um, And I also have lived long enough. In recovery, it's kind of funny because if you can accumulate enough good days, happy days, or even just even keel days, then ultimately they're going to replace all of those bad days that cause us to sit in shame of ourselves. And I probably couldn't say the word self shame enough on this podcast because there are times when I was in the throes of sadness or despair or depression that I would literally Google how to get rid of self shame. How do you do that? Like, what does that look like? Because I hated myself. I despised myself for what I did to other people, to people I loved. And carrying that and it's so tricky because it's the biggest catalyst for me to relapse was when I sat in shame for such extended periods of time without being honest about myself or talking to someone. Because you think you don't deserve anything good. Like you come from that basic premise that I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this woman who's my wife. I don't deserve these two beautiful boys. I don't deserve to be a lawyer. I don't deserve to have my own law practice. And so what do? You sabotage that, you know? And I did that for a long time, and I finally, over a period of time, have forgiven myself. And that's probably the biggest piece to this whole puzzle is being able to forgive yourself and love yourself. It's not about loving somebody else or forgiving someone else. It's about loving yourself and forgiving yourself. It's easily the hardest thing to do in recovery.
And I think that especially with addicts, there's so many levels to it because you could have somebody that hasn't even done that much bad shit that has a hard time. I
Yeah.
mean, I know like my story, and all my listeners already know this, is just that, I was trapped into a thing where I drank every single day. I couldn't take a day off. And I kept making rules for myself. And one of my rules, of course, was like never drive drunk. I had a 4-year-old and I had 18-month-old twins. And I went to a play date with some other moms and I drank martinis without any kind of sense of like, I'm going to have to drive home at some point. My husband was trying to call me all evening. I blew it off because I was like, I'm having a good time. Why is everybody up my ass all the time? And then I got in my car and many people were like, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I was like, "Yes. Oh my God. Obviously, I'm fine, or I wouldn't be driving right now." And then I drove and then I got home. And then my husband was furious and he was like, "You're so drunk. I could barely make it into my house." And I woke up the next morning, one of the worst hangovers I've ever had. Literally went to the ER to get treated for the hangover because it was so bad. And I the shame of just I drove drunk with two little kids in my car. Nothing even happened. Like since that day, I've met so many people that are like, "Girl, are you serious? Like I've done so much worse," or I've I did that and got a DUI and crashed into another, hurt other people. And but I carried that for a long time before I started realizing that in telling that story and letting other people go, "Oh, I've done that. Oh, another person's done that that seems pretty normal and has a pretty normal life and survived." And in talking about it, that's how I get rid of the shame.
And I think you're 100% right. And just hearing yourself say it out loud and sharing that experience with other people and having them share their experiences. And that's one of the highest values I think comes from AA and AA meetings is being able to forgive yourself when you hear other people say that they've done the same thing, if not worse. It allows you to open yourself up to the thought that, hey, maybe I'm not just the only person that's this crazy or this fucking bizarre and whacked out. And I felt just the same way that you felt many times. Like I think I was having a panic attack from withdrawals from opiates, and I was driving my oldest son around, and I had to pull the car over and I beat myself up over that for years, and I don't think there's a scale that you can measure, whether or not your shame is greater or worse than someone else's based on conduct. It's all relative to how it makes you feel. And you described that your friends tell you that, "Oh, I did something so worse than that." That's not really relevant. It's the impact that it has on you. I mean, you very well could have, just like I could have been arrested or pulled over or hit someone or hurt someone. And then we're dealing with a whole whole 'nother set of consequences, that are life-changing for everybody. And so I have to remember that. Thank goodness that didn't happen. But man, and so how did you forgive yourself for that?
I think it it's one of the things about 12 step is that the ability to pay it forward and help the next person.
Yeah,
And the more I feel like sharing my story helps somebody, it took years. I talked about this, I wrote a whole book about it, but I started doing TV shows and so I had written a book, Sippy Cups Are Not for Chardonnay, which
that's
basically
the yeah.
glorified drinking and drinking as a mom and like, how dare you come for moms and our wine? Like, we're just trying to survive out here. So I was this person who had championed that lifestyle and written a funny book about it. So when I got sober, getting honest was really hard because there was a lot of judgment. Oh, yeah, we always thought you were an alcoholic, So I think that when I started going on TV shows, I went on like Dr. Oz before Dr. Oz was a nightmare. And different shows and talked to the Today Show and in telling my story and then having people say, instead of judging me, having people say, me too. And thank you for talking about it. And thank you for saying it. That's how I started chipping away at I was like, I'm never going to be grateful that happened, but I am
Cool.
going to be thankful that I was able to take that experience and get sober from it and then help other people just by
Right.
sharing it.
And in essence, I think what we're both saying is our recovery has evolved and has required a certain amount of time, passage of time. And that's one thing that when you're in the throes of early recovery, you don't have a lot of. Like you're not open to the idea that maybe this is going to be a year or 2 or 5 years of personal growth that's going to happen on top of abstinence.
Right.
Like you don't think that way. If someone were to say that, you'd be like, "Oh fuck, I am so fucked here. Like this is not going to happen." But
Right.
it's the truth. Like it's a time thing. Some of it is just a time thing. And I don't know if that
100%.
means you got to go get in a bunker somewhere or what you got to do, but God, that's true. So true.
So and I feel like you're probably doing it with being a defense attorney. I'm sure that a large percentage of the people who you have to defend, drugs and alcohol are a part of their story.
100%. And so I can relate in that context, and also just in a personal standpoint, I tell clients all the time, like I've been at the very top and I've been at the very bottom. I resigned my bar license. I should have gone to a bankruptcy. Um, I had lost my wife. Kids didn't want to talk to me. Like, if I can sort of come back from that, then you can too. Then anybody can. And being able to honestly say those things to him, I think means a great deal, and it's a big part of I think my 12-step work. Even though I don't actively go to AA, I do a lot of that with clients, and I always recommend for clients that have chemical dependency or mental health issues that they go to inpatient treatment. Like I think that's such a valuable tool and experience. That benefited me that I firmly believe in. I've got several clients right now that are inpatient treatment. And if I represent someone, I don't just try to resolve their criminal case or resolve the allegation, and then send them on their way. I try to get to the core of what caused their conduct, what caused you to be arrested, whether it's mental health, whether it's drug addiction, whatever it is. And I only do that because I know that that's part of my experience that you can band aid a problem, but if you don't fix it, the next 6 months or a year or 2 years, it's gonna come back, and you're gonna have to deal with this again. So I'm like, "Why don't we just deal with this right now? That I can get you out of this DUI, possession of cocaine charge, this is I can do that in my sleep, like, resolve those types of issues for you." But the underlying theme here is not that, it's that you're a fucking drug addict, and so how are we gonna help you with that?
Right.
That's and a lot of times when I do that, like, the parents do perk up, and they're like, "Oh, thank God somebody has identified this for us," because they feel like they're going crazy, as you know. So, it's a big part, my work is also a big part of my recovery.
And let me ask you one more question. With your sons, who are very close in age to my kids, I have a 21-year-old and two 18-year-olds. So I have one graduating college and I have two going into college. I've I'm really curious, like, how much do you share your story with your kids, and how much, like, are you concerned? I know I feel this way, or hyper vigilant of your kids' possibility for addiction. Do you know you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
So,
what do you
my Jennifer and I have sort of adopted this mantra that we don't keep any secrets in our family. Um, and my kids have seen the uglier sides of my addiction. I think it's important for them to know, uh, the impact that's had on my life and that genetically they're predisposed to also having this disease. Um, I will say this though, and I want to make sure that I mentioned this to you before we finish. Um, even though I'm not a practicing AA person, I do fundamentally believe in it, and I think it's a very good thing. Uh, my basic premise is that recovery is very subjective, depending on the person's circumstances and history and so forth. For me personally, and these are just my opinions, so I just certainly don't want to speak for any group or act like my opinion is superior to someone else's. But both of my boys, Dylan, he was born in 2002. Roman was born in 2006. Um, they are both wonderful human beings. Like I see them, and when they're in high school, and like they tell the truth. And I know I'm going to say these basic things that people sort of think, well, of course they do. Well, I didn't. But they look you in the eye. If they tell you something, they mean it. If they have a girlfriend, they don't cheat on their girlfriend. If they say they're coming home, they come. They're just wonderful kids. Like they're and a big part of that, I give credit to their mother, Jennifer, because she was a huge force in shielding a lot of my conduct from them, and making sure they didn't see that. But I also give credit to myself because, like, and I shared this with you on the phone, probably 85 or 90% of their childhood, I was sober. And I know that AA stresses consecutive days of sobriety. But during that, let's say 90% of my sobriety, I probably wasn't sober more than 3 or 4 years in any consecutive stretch. Okay. And so I don't personally put a lot of emphasis on how many days someone has. I can look at that situation with my boys and see the overall impact of how I changed their lives by being sober 90% of the time is jaw-dropping. To see what wonderful human beings, one is in school on the West Coast, one is in law school, neither have been arrested, neither have been to rehab. I've checked all those boxes before I was 19 or 20. And so if you're in recovery and you make a mistake, own it and move on. Don't beat yourself up. Don't the change you can make with just getting back on the horse and trying to make the right decision is immense. Like you have no idea how the goodness that it brings other people in a general sense. I mean, because I do think that sometimes we beat up on ourselves way too much when we relapse or we make a mistake. And like it was like June of last year, June of 25, when I took the barbiturates. I took it for less than 24 hours and I stopped it. Now, does that mean I need to go around and do a whole uh, circuit of saying I relapsed and today's my new sobriety date? And in my opinion, no. I didn't need to do that. I knew what I did was wrong. It was a lapse in judgment. It was called out. Quickly corrected it. But that's just my opinion. I don't want to say that for everyone else, but being sober in a general sense is far from perfect. Don't beat yourself up. And if you make a mistake, you don't have to shout to the world, I'm sorry. You don't need to repent on a cross. Just internally tell yourself, I'm going to reset. That would
I
be
love
my
that.
balls.
What a great sentiment to go out on. I hope everybody enjoyed this as much as I did. Thank you so much for telling your story and sharing so openly. And anything you want to promote?
No,
We'll
I don't.
promote the
No,
Wife's podcast. Your
no.
Instagram.
I think my Instagram is at Josh Welch underscore JOSHWELCH underscore. And I think many of your listeners may know my wife is Jennifer Welch from I've Had
Yes.
It podcast.
Love
And
your podcast. Love you as a guest on the podcast. Love your politics. Everything about it.
well, thank you, Stephanie. It's really been awesome. I dabbled on your podcast and checked parts of it out. I really love your message and the openness that you bring when you have guests on. Like there's not any sort of set agenda. It's just about trying to listen from other people and learn from their experiences. And I think that's valuable. And it's been a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Feeling like life is good, life is good, yeah. Life is good, life